All right, we're now coming back to where we split from our message last week, which was about skills for men. We continue with this topic, beginning with a focus on planning. Planning is something generally necessary in order to successfully accomplish something. So we can title this half, Planning for Success. And our scripture this morning is from the book of Luke, chapter 14, verses 28 and 29, which read, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he's laid the foundation, is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him." In other words, you look rather foolish. You start a project and you can't finish it. And a wise person, of course, would not do that. It's kind of obvious that a man with a plan will always do better than a man who lives by accident. You just take life as it comes along without any direction, purpose, or plan. You're not likely to get very far. And here we see the scripture what I was trying to identify a minute ago, which was in the theme of our song. I know the plans I have for you. Jeremiah 29:11, which plans he tells us God has plans, and he tells us he wants us to have a good future. God's men make plans. We see examples of that for saying King David. He had a plan, desire to build a house for God, and that was not God's intent that he would do this, but rather his son Solomon. But he had a plan. Jonathan likewise. When he was on the battlefield and he saw that there were a large number of Philistines over on an adjacent hill, he said, God is going to help me. And he went with his buddy Jonathan and went over and slaughtered some. Or Nehemiah. He saw that God's city of Jerusalem was broken down. The walls were down. There were no gates. He went to the king and asked for permission. But he didn't just ask for permission. He knew he needed resources in order to accomplish this. So he asked for materials, and he asked for authority to get what he needed. And in Proverbs we read that the plans of righteous are just. Of course, the righteous are going to be pushing for justice because this is one of the things that God looks for so much and wants to see in this world. The righteous allow the Lord to establish their plans. They're committed to the Lord. When they do so, because their plans are consistent with God's will, they're going to lead to success. Whereas the plans of the wicked, of those who are not diligent, lead to poverty and poor results. I'd like to use a little illustration to show what difference planning makes. In this situation, there were three men of the cloth, a priest, a minister, and a rabbi, and their challenge was to convert a bear. We're talking about, big, hairy, wild Bruin. The priest came back and reported that he'd baptized the bear. He sprinkled some water on him, and that amounts to Catholic baptism, and he believed he'd be ready for First Communion next week. Communion, of course, is an event where a small amount of food is consumed, and bears are always hungry. The minister came back and reported that he'd preached to the bear, and after a while he was mesmerized. Apparently he preached so long the bear was half asleep, and he said he should be ready for baptism next week. Now, bears are amenable to getting water, especially if there's a fish or something there, so he figured he had this one. And then both of them looked over at the rabbi. He was bleeding and bruised and all banged up in a body cast, and they said, "What happened?" He said, "Maybe I shouldn't have tried to circumcise him first." And we also need to develop some skills in these areas. When you find yourself in conflict with someone, don't allow yourself to go down to levels of swearing and name-calling and acting in an unchristlike manner. It won't accomplish anything, and it certainly won't please the Lord. But anger will get you started, so we need to control our anger. So, again, we're putting limits on ourselves. So maintain self-control. Don't say things we'll regret. Sometimes a little more time is needed. The tempers are hot, people are annoyed. You just need to reschedule it maybe. Put it off to later, but don't neglect it. Don't let it fester. It's never dealt with. It's in the background. It's a constant annoyance. At some point, you've got to deal with it. Face up and come to some resolution. God in this conflict will help you resolve it. You know, if you and your person that you're having a problem with both come together and put God in the middle, it'll make a huge difference in resolving your conflicts. When you do have a conflict with someone, sometimes the facts get obscured by emotions. You need to start conversing and calm down and get the hotheadedness out. Sit down, cool off, and look for what the real issues are. Many times, what's really the problem is not what it appears to be. There's something behind the scenes. There's some sort of feelings or emotions, and sometimes it's in the back. It's something historical. And if you understand that and can figure it out, then you know how the other person feels, maybe why they're so upset, and you're kind of wondering, this don't make any sense? It may not in the present sense, but maybe you triggered something, a bad memory or something that happened, and it comes to the present. It boils up, and all of a sudden things are going on, and what is this? You have to do a little research. And then there may be more than one way to deal with the situation. You look at the options, evaluate them. What's best? What's wisest? There are answers to most every problem. And sometimes it's just an accommodation changes, and things have changed. And you need to learn to live with the change. Change isn't really the problem. The problem is how you're adapting to it, how you're adjusting to it. It's happened. Like stores are closed right now. You want to go to a restaurant, sit down and eat, you're not going to be able to do it. We have to deal with this. We have to accommodate to it. But it's not a problem. We can still eat. Getting food is our basic need, and we can meet that. We can still go to supermarkets, still go to the refrigerator. Just can't sit in it. You still get takeouts. You just can't sit down in a restaurant. One character trait we should have is that of respect. We should certainly respect our spouses. We're not going to have any kind of good relationship with your spouse if you don't show respect. And we also need to conduct ourselves around our children in a manner that's worthy of respect. If we don't do so, how can we expect it? I've seen too many examples of parents that acting badly around their children. They cuss and swear and smoke and drink, and then even cuss and swear at their children, not just around them. What can you expect of a child with a poor example like this, and what reason does the child have to respect you if you conduct yourself so badly? All parents need to be mindful of this. We also need to revere God as Lord. This is something we, again, don't see much of in our society nowadays. People become very casual and disrespectful toward God without seeming to even recognize it. Now, all this starts with self-respect. If we don't respect ourselves, what foundation does one have to respect other people? So we need to respect ourselves, which of course means you need to conduct yourself in a respect-worthy manner. Peter expressed it this way, that we should honor others, honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, and honor the king. This attitude of honoring, giving honor where it is due, of being respectful and respect-worthy is one that Christians should be known for. Frequently we have to deal with other people, and the way we approach this can make a huge difference in the results we get. One approach many people have is one of wishing, wanting other people to change when the relationship with them is not one where you have any control or influence. What this really means is the other person can take charge of you. It's a losing proposition. That's not the type of relationship one wants to have. Another one is when we set up walls or limits. These are attempts to protect one's weak areas. This is not very intelligent, because if your opponent knows where your weak areas are, they know how to hurt you. They're going to go in for the kill. For example, you say, don't talk about, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go talk about your mother, even though you said, don't do it. So this is not, neither one of these two methods is a good way of approaching a difference with someone. A better tactic for dealing with the situation is to set boundaries. For example, you need to make a phone call, but you have a limited time to do so, so there's a problem with the length. If you set up boundaries and say something like, I have 10 minutes to talk and then I'll have to go, your conversant knows the situation and hopefully going to respect it. If not, they know you're going to cut it off. But if you approach this conversation situation with the wish type of approach, saying you need to cut this conversation short, there's no reason for the person to do so. They may just go on and on and on. Or with the wall type approach, you can say, we can talk about anything except, guess what they're going to want to talk about? And it's not where you want to go, so you put them in control. So the better tactic there is to set boundaries. Let's look at a couple of examples of how these tactics can be applied. Let's say the situation is one of a child throwing a tantrum. With the boundary tactic, you'd say something like this: you have 15 seconds, stop screaming. If you don't, you'll be on time after 15 minutes, which can seem like an eternity to a child. But here, there's clear expectations and there's clear consequences. Wish type tactic, you have to stop screaming. It's not like to accomplish anything. The child will just probably going to keep on screaming, or the wall. I hate it when you scream. You really think the child cares about this? An adult might. Child doesn't. You set yourself up to accomplish nothing, just to continue to be frustrated with the screaming, which won't stop. Well, let's say you need to make an appointment with someone. The boundary approach would be something like this: I can meet with you between 1 and 2, which can be very effective, and the other person can agree to this or not agree, or perhaps you can negotiate it out. But you are going to be on the same page. Whereas a wish will say, I can meet, but he can't go on too long. Well, there's no boundaries. The person doesn't know when they need to stop, and they're probably going farther than you would like them to. Or the wall approach. Let's meet. We can't talk about this, whatever it is, this time. You probably won't end up going there because you left yourself open. As men and as wise people, we need to plan for growth. We should be asking ourselves, how are we going to move closer to God this year? We should be planning for our physical growth, getting exercise, eating well, and skills on the mental and emotional relationship level. Do we read? Do we study? Are we learning or developing in some ways? Are we working to improve some habits? This should be part of our planning, our personal programs as adults that people want to grow. One characteristic for guys is that they like to build, and we see examples in the Bible of this from the very beginning, where Adam was told to care for a garden, so he built a garden. One son built a herd of animals, and the other one built fields of crops. They did something with their hands. They created something. Enoch built a city, and Noah built an ark, and then afterwards an altar. Nimrod, the mighty hunter, built several cities, and worldlings built Tower of Babel. So we have a long history of men building things. We should ask ourselves, what are we building? Now, in our modern world, what we build may not be so physical as it was back then. We build, software and musical compositions and do many things that are not so outwardly visible. But nevertheless, we do build things, and whatever it is, it starts with a dream, with an idea, a concept. And once this is created, then it needs to be actualized. Sometimes this can take a very long time. For Noah, it took 120 years of preaching, 75 years of building before he completed that ark. Abram, who was renamed Abraham, was looking for the promises of God, where we'd have numerous progeny, but it took 25 years just to have the first son, the son of promise, not the other one. For Moses, it was 120 years, spread out in 3 different 40-year sections, one in the courts of Egypt, where he learned and acquired knowledge. Then he would spend another 40 years on the run, caring for sheep, and then finally 40 years working with the hard-headed Hebrews, getting them out of Egypt and trying to get them into the promised land, and being frustrated because they wouldn't obey, they wouldn't follow God, and they repeatedly fell into idolatry. Well, we can make progress. One thing will encourage us on our way is to review God's promises, and there are many of those in the Bible. We're not going to enumerate any of them today. Just one little reminder here from a wise man: never doubt in the darkness what God has told you in the light. So when things get dark, when we are entertaining doubts, we can look at God's word. It's right there. What he has promised us, we can believe it, and then we keep stepping forward and not get disappointed. There's some good advice in what Paul wrote to Corinthians. He said, be on your guard against falsehoods and deceivers. Stand firm in the faith. It's going to be challenged. Be courageous. We need to face the difficulty without unwavering. And be strong. You be strong in every way, and that includes like getting away from things that waste your time, like TV. It just makes you fat and flabby. and do everything in love. And the key element of love to your neighbor is when you're willing to put other people's interest in front of yours. Put them first. Be willing to sacrifice. That's the opposite of the natural selfishness that we have. And we need to act our age. As we go through life, we develop, we go through, decade by decade, we get older, and there are different characteristics associated with these ages which we should be mindful of and prepare for. It's part of life planning. And I know you've done some of that. When you're young, you're idealistic, you get big dreams. You're not worried about what's going to happen years and years from now. Your hormone levels are high, and hopefully you develop some sort of faith. It takes root in you, and you develop that. And then you mature a little bit more. People frequently marry, they have careers and children. It's a time of life when you can accomplish a lot, be industrious, because you've got energy. And your goals shift a little more from yourself towards serving others. You're building a foundation for your career and your family. You need to focus on those. And then people drift into middle age. You get old, you get fat, you get flabby, you slow down, you don't have the strength, you lose your sex drive. And sometimes people, guys in particular, you get in a kind of a midlife panic mode, and they can act a little bit crazy and, do things they ought not to do. Or you may think, try it now or never. There's a little bit of sense to that, but the problem is, of course, that Satan wants to use this as an opportunity to direct us in directions we ought not to be going. Then we get older, we're looking down at retirement. At this point, hopefully you've learned a little bit, you've matured, you're able to give advice, and people respect you because they see you've got some experience and learned a few things. And you may start to be a grandparent. Then in retirement, people are more living in the past. You don't have strength and energy much left anymore. You tend to look more back at what you did and, share stories and memories. Your energy levels are down. You're retired in many cases. And these are patterns of life that people go through, which we should be knowledgeable of. But along the way, you're going to have to adjust to changes in your body and your life. I put on weight like many other people do, and I hate it. But it's part of life. You look at young people, they're still young and slim in many cases, not always, and envy them. But we need to take care of ourselves. Where strength is diminishing, we need to plan for that. You're not going to be able to do some things the way you used to do it. You maybe need, for example, an electric garage door opener because you can't lift that thing anymore. Just to give an example. We want to be a positive influence on other people. And part of fighting the midlife battles, to have some trusted friends, people you can you talk to that are not going to look to make you look bad or do you harm or anything. And as we're fading off the scene, we need to look for others to take over. Even as young and as small as Overbrook is, that is part of our planning. We're looking forward to that because I'm not going to be around for so long, but I've got to push through this phase right now, get us, established. And as we go through life, we can look back and see what God has done for us and remember His faithfulness, and to fortify ourselves, but also to strengthen others when they can see what's happened and how God's been leading. As you get older, one of the skills one wants to develop is to tell stories. I'm not a good storyteller. I'm terrible. I'm awful. Not good at all. But there are some points that are useful to telling a good story. Particularly, focus here is for the older, more retired people. First of all, you want to communicate something. There's a point. There's something trying to get across. What is it? And then there's some details or things that'll support it and explain it. But you can get too long-winded and throw in, the kitchen sink and a bunch of other things which may be interesting, but just stretch it out and don't make the point. And you may end up confusing people because you're trying to tell a story about a car and you've mentioned too many things about a house, and it doesn't all add up. You need to just leave that out. Make another story out of it. And then concluding with a punchline, summarizing the message in a nice, strong manner that makes an impact. We also want to be love-wise. We live in a society that is saturated with sex and doesn't know a difference between loving and making love in many cases, unfortunately. We want to get our kids to understand the difference so they don't make bad decisions and suffer the consequences of sex outside of marriage. Just forgetting morality, unfortunately. Part of the problem that we have is that, and particularly in Christian communities, there's a negative attitude towards sex, like this is something bad. It's not bad. God invented sex. God told Adam and Eve to get it together. Sex is not a sinful thing. It's sex outside of marriage that's a sinful. So we need to be a little more open and honest about this. When we aren't, what happens is children figure, well, it's bad, well, they naturally are going to be pushed by the devil to check it out. The devil doesn't push people to tempt them toward good. He tempts them toward evil. And we set them up unwittingly when we have all these negative attitudes towards sex and won't talk about it, don't want to deal with it. It creates a curiosity that they want to satisfy. But if we satisfy it for them by being open and honest about it, this removes an avenue that the devil can use to tempt them into bad behavior. So a good attitude towards sex is one of sharing, not consuming. Consuming is one of the mindsets of our modern economy and also of human behavior. We want to consume everything, and we bring this attitude over into marriages many times. Like it's a marriage is something where we get, and so if we don't get what we're expecting. Well, why not break up? Try another one. So the devil gives us all sorts of excuses, like, yeah, I'm not happy anymore. Well, we tend to plateau in things that we do. You may start off, really hot and happy when you're married, and after a while it gets to be a little bit more boring or less exciting, which is perfectly normal to be expected. And then some little rough patches come along, or there's some annoyance, or maybe someone gets laid off and the money gets tight, and you start taking different attitudes towards your spouse in marriage. Well, you can't do that. It's supposed to go on for life, and it certainly can, but you have to hang in there with it. And then more excuses like, she really loved me, she'd be more cooperative about, well, maybe you're not cooperating with her. Are you seeing her side or just your own? Or your kids don't appreciate anything I do, they won't miss you. Well, kids tend to act that way. That's normal, but it's not an excuse to jump out of marriage and let the kids flounder. Every research that you look at will tell you that kids do much better with both parents. That's the way God designed it. It's natural. It's what expecting anything else is self-deceit. Or the attitudes people may take toward church. The church doesn't meet my needs anymore. The more folks and young people or whatever. What are you doing for the church? This consumer mentality, we want to get, we want to consume. But what about giving? What about doing something? What about looking at the points of view of other people? Or at work, people should notice me. I'm smarter than them, but they're content to just fumble along on their own. Well, maybe they're not as dumb as you think you are. You're not the king of the hill that knows everything, but if you come with this type of attitude, yes, you're going to be dissatisfied. And maybe these other people are smarter, whatever. However, they got the positions you don't. You need to have a peaceful relationship with them and respect them. Oh, your wife does pretty much have. She's going to lose if she doesn't start to pay attention to my needs. Well, what about her needs? It's a mutual thing about meeting one another's needs. It's all not all get. If it's all getting, well, then who's doing the giving? And how's the giver feel? Like they're worn out, tired, taken for granted, and disappreciated? And you've got your attitudes? Doesn't work. It's need to be decided. Which leads us to a great Christian quality, selflessness, which is leaving ourselves back over here and looking toward others to meet their needs. This is a paraphrase of scripture here. It's absolutely clear that God has called you to a free life. Just make sure that you don't use the freedom as an excuse to do whatever you want to do and destroy your freedom. That's a confusion that Satan gives. Rather, use your freedom to serve one another in love. That's how freedom grows, serving one another in love. For everything you know about God's word is summed up in a single sentence. Love others as you love yourself. This act of true freedom. If you bite and ravage each other, watch out! No time at all will be annihilating each other. Where will your precious freedom be then? That's from Galatians. We can't be acting that way toward one another. At the end, it's all bad. It's all negative. You tear one another up. And when we're tempted by sin, God teaches us, saying no to ungodliness, to worldly passions. Live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. We need to say no to these selfish tendencies to sin, to please ourselves, to please the flesh. Forgiveness is another skill that we need to develop to do well in life. Starts with putting it on the table. What is it that you need to forgive, or who do you need to forgive? Maybe someone needs to forgive you, but you can identify that. And then start admitting it, whether it's their wrongdoing or your wrongdoing, whatever it is, you need to deal with it. And deal with it starts with naming it, with putting a face on it. And many times it starts with yourself, and not expecting the other person to make up. Maybe they are totally wrong. But if you're going to wait on that, you may be waiting a long time because they're not ready to do that. You need to start with yourself and your attitude toward the other person. You can think, and you may be totally right. They did you wrong. They did you dirt. They shouldn't have done something. But if this is if you're going to allow this to define your relationship forever, it's going to forever be a bad relationship. You may have to get over it and let it pass, even though you've been victimized, you've been done wrong. But for the sake of harmony and for the sake of your own spiritual welfare, let it go. And another bad way that people deal with a situation where they've been wrong sometimes is the other person knows it and they won't forgive them. Instead, they manipulate them. They're constantly making the other person feel guilty or bad over the offense. That's not how Christians act. It may be, you may feel good about it, think, yeah, they did me wrong, I'm going to let them know it. I'm going to let them know it. Let it go. You got to let go of it. And if you don't, you're going to your personal growth is going to stop because you created these bad relationships, bad attitudes toward other people that as a Christian you need to let go. So as humans, we find ourselves in situations where we can make choices, as I just mentioned, a few of them right there, because we don't like being told what to do. We're like that as children, as adults too, but it's part of life. We need to take directions and instructions. So what happens? We get curious, we get disobedient, we need to tell ourselves, take the best choice. The best choice is oftentimes not the one most attractive or one you really want to make. Connecting is an area men tend to have more difficulty in than women. Women tend to chat it up and get going, whatever. For guys, it's often more difficult. We need to try to find a way to get a conversation started. So one way is to look for common interests, things you have in common, and feelings, how you feel about things, and then listen. Particularly, if you're dealing with women, the listening part, you may not want to do it, but many times they'll talk. Much more than men will. Another way to connect with other people is ask for advice. I was real surprised. There's a gentleman who had some expertise, or at least some experience in one area of a church, and I approached him one time, and he was really surprised. But this exemplifies his advice here, that I would ask him for advice. Well, this is an area he knew more about than I did. He'd done it, and I recognized that and respected it. And this is a way to relate to people, and it creates good relationships because the other person has value in your eyes, and they see that when you ask for advice. But we need to watch our body language. Sometimes we can say one thing and do something else. I was embarrassed recently. I was shaking hands with somebody, and I expected to be just a quick shake and run. But the person held my hand for a moment, and my eyes were someplace else. And I realized he was looking at my face and, oh, this doesn't work. Get back to making some eye contact. Wasn't intended, but we can do that sometimes. It doesn't make for good relations. Relationships can go through different levels. Start real casual. You're cautious. You don't know anything about the other person. It may even be a distant relative. So you don't say anything real personal because you don't know the other person. But after a while, you get a little more curious. You're a little more comfortable around them. Like your casual friends, or maybe it's a person of the opposite sex. They're interesting. You get curious. You talk some more. Or your coworkers. Then relationships can move up to a little higher level where you know one another some. You trust one another. You become friends, the gal or guy becomes your steady, or maybe it's a trainee, someone on your job. They see you and they respect you. They're learning from you, and after a while, a relation's going to move to a higher level where you're connected. Like your teachers, you have a relationship. You're learning. You ask questions and get answers. Or you're really getting close to someone, getting ready to marry, or maybe the mentors, someone you respect, they're teaching you and giving you advice. And finally, the very highest level of relationships are where one is committed to another person, most often to your spouse or your children. You love and care about your kids, you care about them. So we can understand these different levels and act in an appropriate way at different levels. If you act committed towards someone that you really don't know, it's just a casual relationship, you're going to get yourself in problems. You create problems for yourself, get in bad situations. So we need to be mindful of how relationships develop and develop when we can, and be cautious and maybe stay that way in other cases when we see this is not a person I want to get to know too close. Women, guys, we know they like compliments, they like to be helped, they like to be romanced, and we want to remember things like this. And how do we relate to children? In Ephesians, we're counseled, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord, which is a fundamental responsibility of parents. We want to train them for self-discipline to do right. Children need discipline, but the real objective is to get it into their head. This is what you want to do. This is what you need to do. It's for your own good. And when they understand that, then they can be successful in life and stay out of jail and not go be dealing drugs and that kind of stuff. But if they don't understand that there's a better way and that this is for your own good and that they want to do it themselves, there's going to be problems. Making decisions is another skill that we need to develop. There's some questions, some concerns that we can use to help us make a decision. For example, does it line up with your convictions? Is this something that you believe in, or maybe you're thinking you're doing something which it's not right? You're not convicted to do this. You're yielding to temptation. Is it something that people that you respect could agree with you doing, or people you respect would say, no, you shouldn't do that? Well, don't go there. And you may have to straight out ask them, how about your self-respect? Are you respecting boundaries, or you're doing something which, no, not right? How about your personal growth? Your important relationships? There are things you can do that not good for your important relationships, so you need to respect them and don't allow yourself to make a decision to do something like that. And finally, could you encourage your best friend to do this? Stay away. If you still need help making a decision, you can take a piece of paper and make pros and cons, make a list of what's what. Maybe there's alternate courses of actions, different things. Maybe there's 1, 2, 3, more than one way to things that you could do, decisions you can make. You prioritize them. What's best? What's most desirable? Sometimes we can't do what's most desirable, but at least we know and you've given it consideration and planning. And we need to realize that quality is more important than quantity or volume. That's what God's looking for. He's looking for quality people that he can take to heaven. A whole gang full of people in the church that don't love one another, that just go through the motions, is not what God's looking for. He's looking for us to be true Christians, loving one another and caring. And that same principle carries over into our lives. And as Paul would tell us, we need to finish what we start. Endurance is a quality which God calls of Christians. Think about Noah's project, 75 years to build that ark. In the meantime, the neighbors are just insulting him and calling him a fool. He's a nutcase, whatever. And he had a few doubts himself. No one ever built a boat before. And all he had was some plans and specifications that God had given him. And it had never rained before. I mean, we take rain for granted. Up until then in the world, it was always water just by a mist. There was a heavy mist at night, which caused dew, and it put enough moisture on the ground for things to grow. And Noah's going around telling people it's going to rain, it's all water's going to come out the sky. Nobody believed him. He sounded like a crazy man. And what was going to happen when he completed this project? The earth's going to drown. Well, who wants that? The success of his project meant destruction for all the people that didn't accept his message. Nobody wanted to hear this. That was tough to carry on, preach for 120 years and build this project. But we need to endure to the end. If you can do right, and then I can think of a deacon that I knew. I don't know how he repented, but he was a good deacon for many years, but he had a weakness. He wasn't very attractive to women. And a woman sized him up one day and suckered him, and he spent his money, bought her a car, and had whoopee, and ended up being out of the church and no longer a deacon. I don't know if he ever repented, got back to God, but he lived right all his life. And then at the end, we've got to persevere to the end. Otherwise, we're not going to make it through the pearly gates. And marriage, of course, is supposed to last for life. And it's guaranteed you're going to have some unhappy times. There are going to be disagreements. Something's going to happen. And once in a while, your spouse may even seem like an enemy. They're really not, but you may think that. And if you want excuses to break up, there's going to be some along the way. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to forgive, and you're going to need forgiveness sometimes. Anticipate it, plan for it, and persevere on. And understand your spouse, hey, guys and gals don't think and respond the same way. It's normal. Expect it. And you're going to need good humor. If you got a short fuse and you can't laugh occasionally, you're going to have a rough time. Sometimes you're going to have to laugh and say, hey, let's keep on going. And the woman wants security. She wants, to feel safe. She doesn't want a guy that spent the money on someplace else other than rent or necessary expenses. And she doesn't know what's coming down next or how the kids are going to get fed. She doesn't even want that. She wants to be loved, valued, be able to express herself, care for herself, and be loved and cared for. And she wants to be herself. There was been some very old traditional types of relationships where men thought they could, dominate their wives and, dictate to them, and the wife really didn't have a life. It was all centered on the guy. That's really not Christ-like, and it certainly doesn't work in this day and age. A woman expects much more freedom to, live her life, do her things, just like you want to do your things. She wants to do some of her things. You may have your man cave, and she's got her sewing room or whatever. It's part of life. It's part of respecting one another. And so if the woman feels secure and, financially, and, there's different levels now. Some people live in mansions and some people live in, one efficiency apartments. You do with what you can do, but you're together on it. So you can trust one another. And women, as I've mentioned before, don't like to be treated like problems. You can help them solve problems, but really, she's not a problem. Don't treat her like one. Guys and gals have different patterns of conversation. Guys like to, get it done. Like a guy goes shopping in a store, he wants a pair of shoes, he goes in and buys a pair of shoes, he comes back out. The woman, she's still in there looking, making up her mind. It's different. It's nothing. It's not right or wrong. It's simply difference between the genders. So, but for conversation, the guys, say what they want to say. They're done with it. A gal, they're just enjoying talking. Okay, get it over with. Get done. The guy wants to leave, but we have to understand this. And love, you can say love languages. The way love is expressed. But when you do this, it lowers stress levels between guys and gals. When you compliment one another, it builds confidence. When the other person knows that they're respected for doing well. People grow slowly. I'm not going to get personal on this, but sometimes it takes a while for someone to learn something, but to you it's really obvious and simple, like, bam. Well, the other person doesn't take it quite so well. It take a while to learn it, to make the change. You got to be patient, live with it. And you need to be loyal to your spouse. Stand together, Listen to one another. It's not all the guy knows everything, the gal doesn't know everything. No, sometimes she knows more than you do. And sometimes just to say, yeah, honey, you're right. And it's the truth. It makes it much better relationships. And help one another grow. Play together, laugh together. And coming to wrapping up here, at the end of life, one leaves a legacy. This life is really just a preparation for eternity. So what are you going to leave behind when all's said and done, when your life is over? You stuck together with your spouse, as long as you've been living. Have you made the Bible a important part of your life? Do you have a Bible verse that you can think about to remind you to when you get discouraged, when you need to get away from what the world is dumping on you? Can you turn to God's Word? Maybe it's a bumper sticker, something, an inspirational one that gives you encouragement. Your assets, whatever you've been built up. Some people want to leave this to their children because they have children. Some people don't, and they want to leave it for a good cause. But above all, we need to decide to finish our course, to keep walking with God to the end. This message has been a little more focused on men than women, but men, the principles apply likewise. So question challenge I'd like to leave with us today: are you improving your man skills? Hopefully there's been a little bit of inspiration today, some skills that you can improve to make you a better man, a better husband, a better person in the community. And are you determined to carry on, following Jesus until the end? We can't quit. We can't stop. If we do, where's our end? Let's keep that in mind.